After many years of marriage, it can become difficult to maintain friendly and close relations because most of our time is devoted to family responsibilities. Still, I managed to find a balance. However, during a recent camping trip with friends, I uncovered a shocking truth about my wife, which led me to start my own investigation. There are men who are completely unaware of things happening in their marriages. I was one of them. Men like us should have a special place to meet, share a drink, and confess our ignorance. The only issue is that we probably wouldn't even realize such a meeting was meant for us. Mary and I got married when we were just 20 years old. We spent so much time together, raised 3 children, and even managed to have some fun in between pregnancies. I always tried to be a faithful husband, following advice from books on marriage. When our youngest, Allison, went to college, I began to wonder how Mary would spend her time with the kids grown and gone. She decided to volunteer at a hospital, dedicating 3 days a week to helping out. She worked in the gift shop, the children's playroom, and other areas. Despite our children moving out, our group of friends stayed close. We gathered monthly for barbecues and house parties. I became especially close to 3 men from our group because of our shared love of fishing. We often planned weekend fishing trips, usually 4 or 5 times a year. I thought our marriage was like everyone else's, a typical lifestyle. The children grew up and moved away. Our wives found ways to keep busy, and we husbands focused on our careers while counting down the days to retirement. During one fishing trip in May, the 4 of us talked about family, relationships, and intimacy. While fishing, Jack shared a story about visiting his son at Stanford and finding an empty contraceptive wrapper in his room. Paul followed with a story about his daughter, who had confessed to her mother about having a boyfriend. We laughed about the challenges of parenting young adults. Then Mike, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. When I asked him what he was thinking, he hesitated and said, I don't know if I should say this. It could offend someone or hurt us all. After a pause, he confessed, I saw your wife, Nick. She parked her car behind the Marriott twice in the last month. Whose wife? Jack asked in shock. Nick's wife, Mike said quietly. I deliver groceries to the Marriott 3 times a week, and I saw her there. I tried to brush it off, but deep inside, I couldn't ignore what Mike had said. Why would Mary go to the Marriott twice in 1 month? Could she really be unfaithful to me? Back in town, I went home, but found Mary was out. That evening, I started thinking of ways to uncover the truth. Over the next few days, I secretly ordered some equipment, a GPS tracker and a recording device, and installed them in her car without her knowledge. The following week, Mary told me she didn't have any hospital duties and was going shopping. From my office, I tracked her movements. She visited the mall, the market, and then returned home by early afternoon. But by 1:30, she was out again. This time, she drove to the Marriott. I decided to follow her. Parking nearby, I waited and watched. After a few hours, I saw Mary leave the hotel. At the same time, Alex White, a friend from our social circle, walked out of the same exit. Mary and Alex exchanged nods before parting ways. Alex was married to one of the most attractive women in our group, so seeing him there added another layer of confusion to my suspicions. As Mary returned home, I received a call from her. She sounded cheerful. Nick, what would you like for dinner tonight? She asked. How about something adventurous, like a dish with hot sauce? I replied, Oh, we're out of hot sauce, she said with a laugh. Maybe something fresh and nutritious, like a salad or grilled salmon? I couldn't tell if her casual tone was genuine or if she was hiding something. The truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. I tried to steer the conversation toward usual topics, hiding my true feelings. What time will you be home? I asked. About 5, Mary replied. Sounds good. See you later, I said. Hanging up, as I ended the call, an idea struck me. I decided to park my car and walk into the Marriott. At the front desk, I noticed the daughter of one of my clients. I made small talk for a few minutes before gathering the courage to ask her, "I heard my friend stays here. Could you check it out for me?" Without hesitation, she asked, "What's his name?" "Alex. Alex White," I replied. She typed on her keyboard and after a few moments said, "He checks into his room every Thursday morning and stays until the next day. He always chooses the same room. Sometimes he comes on other days, but Thursdays are a constant habit." Curious, I asked if she could print out the details. She hesitated. "Will anyone find out?" "Absolutely not," I assured her. "Do you need a hard copy?" she asked. "Yes, please," I said. She handed me a Marriott folder. Unsure if I would need it immediately, I put it in my briefcase and left. When I got home, Mary had prepared a salmon salad for dinner. We ate together, and she talked about her day, mentioning she stayed at the mall until 3 o'clock and stopped at the market on her way home. As she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't being honest. After dinner, I went to the bathroom. I saw the wet shower and noticed clothes in the laundry basket. Anger started building inside me. Was Mary really having an affair with Alex? It seemed obvious she wasn't being truthful. That evening, while she relaxed on the couch with a book, I went to my computer. Scrolling through my contacts, I found the email address of Alex's wife, Helen. Using a different email account, I sent her a direct message. "If you want to know who is cheating on you when and where Alex, please reply to this email. I have evidence you might want to see. I'm not looking for financial gain." I sent the email at 8:10 p.m. By 9 p.m., she had replied, "I have almost a whole day off tomorrow. I'll be at the new house on Oak Street in Claremont. Feel free to come by for lunch or any time while the house is open." After reading her reply, I deleted both her email and mine. Later, I went to bed. Mary joined me, but I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, Mary woke up early and started preparing for her day at the hospital. I went to work as usual. At noon, I called her. "Can I take care of dinner tonight?" I asked. "What are you planning to cook?" she replied. "Is there any dish you'd like?" "Jammalia," she exclaimed. "Jammalia it is," I assured her. After checking her GPS location at the hospital, I left work. As I drove past Alex's office, I noticed him and two other men entering the dining area. I quickly parked and quietly installed another GPS tracker on Alex's car. Afterward, I went to a sandwich shop for lunch and bought a salad for Helen. Around 1 p.m., I parked near the open house and walked in. When Helen saw me, her face turned pale. She quickly put up a sign saying she'd be back at 2 o'clock and led me inside. We sat down on the sofa. Tears filled her eyes, and she seemed on the verge of an emotional breakdown. I reached into my briefcase and handed her the Marriott records. As she read them, tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," I said softly. Her face reflected pain and vulnerability. "This disgusting man has been cheating on me for months," she said. "And he's been involved with your wife, Mary, for at least part of that time." "I'm truly sorry," I said. She wiped her eyes and, after a pause, firmly stated, "He's going to pay for this. But this paper alone isn't enough. We need solid evidence and a clear plan." "I agree," I replied. "I tend to act impulsively, but we need a well-thought-out approach." For the next hour, Helen and I discussed our options and developed a plan. Later that day, I found information about an upcoming conference in Las Vegas for professionals in my field. Coincidentally, there was another conference for real estate agents at the same venue. Excited, I shared the details with Helen. We decided to use the opportunity to gather more evidence. I made my reservation and told Mary about the trip. "It's a great opportunity to make professional connections," I explained. "Would you like to come with me?" Although she seemed interested, she hesitated and said she needed to think about it. Meanwhile, Helen told Alex about the real estate conference and asked him to join her. He declined, claiming a busy schedule. The next day, Mary called me at work. "I'm not sure about going to Vegas," she said. "It's such a long trip. Maybe I'll visit my sister instead. I tried to hide my disappointment and didn't press the issue. Later, I contacted Henry Hawkins, my business lawyer, to ensure there were no conflicts of interest regarding Mary, both personal and professional. We discussed the potential consequences of a divorce, the division of property, and strategies to protect myself and my assets. By 4 p.m., I had a clear plan in motion. My phone rang. It was Helen calling from a payphone. She mentioned she had booked a room at Treasure Island, while I had reserved one at the Mirage Hotel. She asked what she should bring. I suggested taking a laptop, a personal phone book, and a cell phone with affordable international coverage. That evening, as I finished packing, Mary came into the room and checked my suitcase. "You forgot your swimming trunks," she remarked. "I'm not planning to swim," I replied. "A quick swim can refresh you after all your meetings," she advised. I grabbed the swimming supplies, packed them, and carried my suitcase to the car. After completing my usual evening chores, I playfully suggested we have some fun before my trip. Mary, looking tired, smiled and said, "Maybe when you come back." Before dawn, I left the house. By 7:30, my phone rang. It was Helen. "Where are you?" she asked. "Almost at Pomona," I replied. "Remember that Denny's near the fairgrounds? Stop there, and I'll meet you in 20 minutes. "Sound good." "Of course," I said. "Should I order for you?" "No, I'll wait," she replied. I pulled into the Denny's parking lot. Helen arrived wearing jeans, a loose Western-style shirt, and boots, a surprise compared to the polished look she usually had at social events. She smiled, sat down, and ordered coffee. As we ate, I noticed how different she seemed, relaxed, almost carefree. She complained about driving to Vegas alone, so I invited her to ride with me. She agreed, and we moved her things into my car before heading to the nearest parking lot to leave her vehicle for 3 days. For the next 3.5 hours, we drove to Las Vegas. Helen took notes while we discussed our plans. We stopped in Baker to refuel and stretch. Despite the pain of infidelity that initially brought us together, we had built a strong connection. Along the way, we laughed, shared our sorrows, and deepened our camaraderie. After dropping her off at her hotel, I went to my room. Once there, I called my lawyer. He chuckled and told me, "Your wife was at her lover's house today. There's video evidence. Compromising activities in his backyard pool. Even today's issue of Time magazine was on the table next to them." "Maybe I should ask Helen to contact you," I said. "She might already have. If you both hire me, I can save you a significant amount of money," he replied. I asked a hypothetical question. What happens if Helen and I decide to be together while in Vegas? Unless your wife or Alex is monitoring you, it won't change anything. We'll block their numbers. Should Helen submit the divorce documents before your return, or would you prefer to handle it later? "No. I want to be present when the locks are changed and serve the documents myself," I replied. "I also want a restraining order to keep Mary away from my business and home." "When do you need everything prepared?" he asked. "I'll discuss it with Helen and let you know," I said. An hour later, I met Helen at Caesar's, the restaurant she had chosen for dinner. As we ate, I called our lawyer again, instructing him to wait until our return before taking action. Meanwhile, I asked my assistant to gather additional evidence. After dinner, we strolled through the shopping district. Despite my growing attraction to her, we refrained from physical contact. I couldn't shake the thought that Mary might be cheating on me even now. At the taxi stand, Helen turned to me before getting in. There was an unspoken desire between us, but we both held back. She left for her hotel, and I returned to mine. Back in my room, the phone rang. It was Mary. "It's getting late. Where have you been?" she asked. "I had dinner at Caesar's and went for a walk," I replied. "I saw a beautiful outfit I think you'd like. Should I buy it for you? You know I don't wear provocative clothes," she said. "I'm almost 50. So, it's a no?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. But if you find a nice necklace or piece of jewelry, I'd be grateful. All right, I said. I'll take a look tomorrow. For now, I'm turning off my phone and getting some rest. Good night, Mary. I adore you. Sweet dreams, she said, without reciprocating my sentiment. After my nightly routine, I was about to turn off the lights when there was a knock at the door. Hi, I said, opening it to find Helen standing there in her jeans and Western-style shirt. Alex hadn't even answered my calls. He was with your wife, she began, her voice trembling. Are you here for revenge? I asked. At first, yes, but not anymore, she admitted. Alex ruined our marriage. I could have spent years drowning in self-pity, pretending to be a victim. I used to feel consumed by sadness whenever melancholic songs played on the radio. But instead of wallowing in despair, I made a decision to change my life and shape it into what I wanted. I long for you to be next to me in bed, Helen confessed, her voice trembling with emotion. But I didn't want intimacy. I craved your companionship and love, but I'm not ready for anything more, at least not yet. Her vulnerability touched me deeply. I put my arm around her shoulders and gently asked, What do you like? I like being loved and cared for, she replied softly. I'll give it my all, I promised. I went to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and we took turns freshening up. Between exchanges of light kisses, we eventually climbed into bed. Helen, I want us to lie down, hug, and fall asleep in each other's arms, I said. Helen cupped my face in her hands, a tear rolling down her cheek. We shared a tender kiss before she nestled next to me. I wrapped my arms around her as we fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to a soft kiss from Helen. That kiss led to a moment of intimacy, something I couldn't resist. Afterward, we both felt exhausted and drifted back to sleep. By the time we woke again, it was nearly noon. After getting dressed, we headed to Helen's hotel room so she could change into fresh clothes. While she got ready, I called my lawyer. Alex and Mary spent the night together in your marital bed, he informed me. The photographer also documented various rooms in your house, including the backyard, bedroom, living room, and your desk. Thank you for the update, I said, ending the call. Helen and I got into the car and drove to Lake Mead. Our conversation was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, and regret. Despite the picturesque surroundings, the pain lingered. By the time we reached Kingman, Arizona, my heart felt heavy. Over dinner, we acknowledged that the love Mary and I once shared had long since faded. Similarly, Helen realized her relationship with Alex was irreparably broken. We drove back to Las Vegas, lost in thought, discussing plans for the future and how our children would cope after the divorce. Back at the hotel, I packed my belongings and checked out, moving into Helen's room. As we lay in bed that night, Helen started to cry. Despite my efforts to stay strong, I felt tears welling up. This wasn't like my relationship with Mary, where intimacy had been rushed and devoid of emotion. With Helen, simply being together brought me immense joy. The next morning, we shared another intimate moment, followed by a nap. When we woke, we ordered food and prepared to leave. At the parking lot, Helen turned to me with a puzzled look. What now? She asked. I don't want to share a bed with Alex anymore, she admitted. I want to be with you. Alex and Mary have been doing this for a long time. Why can't we? I asked. Really? She said, her voice uncertain. Yes. Let's stop feeling angry, abandoned, or offended. They can chase their desires, and we'll find happiness together, I said. Did we win? She asked. The real victory, I replied, is waking up next to you every morning and building a life together. But what if Alex doesn't truly want to be with Mary? What if this is just a game to him? Then they'll get what they deserve. They've given up honesty, and in doing so, they're losing two wonderful people, I said. Helen took a deep breath. I need time to think about everything. Of course. Let's meet in my office to discuss things further, I suggested. As she got into her car, I leaned in and kissed her. Drive safely, I said, This kiss carried a promise, the love I was ready to give her. As she drove away, I wondered if she would accept my offer. Later, when I arrived at the parking lot, Helen was already waiting by her car. As soon as I parked, she hurried over, squeezed into the space between me and the steering wheel, and said, "I love you. I want to wake up with you every morning. I will marry you." She showered me with kisses, then paused. "What's next?" "We need to talk to our spouses," I said, pulling up the GPS to check the route. The GPS showed both beacons indicating that Alex and Mary were at Helen's house. "Sit down and we'll go to your place," I said to Helen. 10 minutes later, we parked discreetly behind Helen's house and entered through the back door. Inside, muffled sounds greeted us. We searched the house quietly, and when we reached the living room, there they were, Alex and Mary on the floor, oblivious to our presence. Mary had betrayed me, and yet they continued their actions as if we weren't there. I gestured to Helen to sit on the sofa, and I joined her, trying to keep my composure. Helen avoided looking at me, her face a mixture of disbelief and anger. The scene before us was both painful and humiliating, filled with awkward sounds and unspoken words. Eventually, Alex noticed us. "Oh no," he stammered, frozen in place. Mary, realizing we were watching, stopped abruptly. Helen broke the silence. "You ruined my carpet," she said coldly. Mary scrambled to gather her clothes, her face pale with embarrassment. Alex, still on the floor, sat there as if in a daze. I kept my tone measured. "Maybe you need a moment to get dressed," I suggested. Mary's voice trembled as she tried to explain. "Oh my God, Nick, I feel terrible about this. We didn't plan this." Tears welled in her eyes. "Let's talk after you've freshened up," I said firmly. They hurried out of the room, leaving their scattered belongings behind. I gathered their clothes and took them to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Helen was on her knees, furiously scrubbing the carpet. "The next steps are up to you," I told her. "Which house should we live in? Do you want to stay here or come to my place?" "Why should I choose?" she replied bitterly. "They betrayed us. We have to decide together." Moments later, Alex and Mary returned to the living room. I motioned for them to sit on the sofa, and they took opposite ends, avoiding eye contact with us. Helen hesitated, but finally sat next to me. Alex opened his mouth to speak, but Helen silenced him with a raised hand. She turned to him and asked bluntly, "Alex, do you truly love this woman, or is this just physical attraction?" After a moment of silence, Alex lowered his gaze and glanced at Mary. "I think I love her," he admitted. I turned to Mary. "And you? Do you love Alex?" Mary nodded hesitantly. "If things were different, would you consider moving in together?" I asked. Alex hesitated. I don't want our marriage to be over," he muttered. "So you're asking me for permission to keep seeing my wife?" I shot back sharply. "Do you think Helen should deal with the consequences of your actions alone? I didn't want you to find out. I didn't want anyone to get hurt," Alex said weakly. "I want to save my marriage." Helen's tone turned icy. "Would you mind if I had an affair?" Alex's eyes widened in shock. "No, you're my wife." I leaned forward. "How would you feel if I had an affair with Helen right here, on this carpet, in your living room?" Alex's face turned pale. "No, it shouldn't be like that," he stammered. "Wait, are you two connected?" "No," I replied firmly. "But maybe it would be fair for you to experience the emotional damage of betrayal firsthand." Mary began sobbing, apologizing repeatedly. "I'm so sorry, Nick. I never meant to hurt you." Alex, on the other hand, lashed out at Mary. "You've been planning this. Meeting at the Marriott. How many times?" Helen's patience ran out. "Alex, you have 5 minutes to pack your suitcase and leave," she ordered coldly. "Call your lawyer and arrange for the rest of your belongings later." Alex froze, but Helen started counting down. At 1 minute, I walked to the bedroom door. "You'd better leave before time runs out," I said. Hurriedly, Alex threw his things together and left without a word. Turning to Mary, Helen said, "You have 5 minutes to pack and leave as well." Mary nodded silently and followed me to our house. Once inside, she sank into a kitchen chair, shaking with sobs. "I'm really sorry, Nick," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Good. You should be," I replied calmly. "But let's be honest. In January, you started a relationship with Alex. That's when our intimate relationship ended. Was it something I missed? Were you unhappy with me?" "No," Mary whispered. "But Alex made me feel important in ways I hadn't felt before. With him, I felt valued. I thought maybe I wasn't needed anymore. The kids are grown. You seem to have everything under control. And now?" I asked, meeting her tearful gaze. Mary sobbed harder. "He didn't even say goodbye when he left. He's not filing for divorce, so he doesn't want to be with me either." I nodded, my voice steady. "You were a convenient choice for him. That's the role you played in all this." Mary's shoulders slumped under the weight of my words. This affair had cost her everything: her marriage, her home, and her future with me. Perhaps now, she would finally understand the consequences of her choices. Mary sat at the kitchen table, her tears streaming freely. I grabbed a Diet Coke from the fridge and sat across from her. When her sobs finally subsided, I glanced at my watch. "You have 5 minutes," I reminded her calmly, setting the oven timer. The timer ticked down as I silently observed her. When it finally went off, Mary rose and packed her remaining belongings into 2 suitcases. The door closed behind her, and I watched from the window as she loaded her bags into the car. Alex, waiting nearby in his vehicle, followed as she drove away. In my office, I switched on the surveillance system. On the screen, I saw them part a short distance from the house. The audio feed revealed Alex getting into Mary's car. "They won't actually divorce us," Alex said, trying to reassure her, though his voice lacked conviction. Mary's sobs filled the car. "You don't understand," she said bitterly. "Nick will divorce me. He'll never take me back. I used to be a good wife," she lamented, her voice trembling. "Now I'm nothing. What have you done to me?" "What are you going to do now?" she demanded, her anger breaking through. "You don't care about what happens to us. We got caught, and now you're abandoning me. You're a coward, Alex." Mary's frustration turned to spite. "If I could, I'd send those photos to your children, but not mine. They don't deserve this." Her voice cracked with pain. "I can't bear the thought of my kids seeing me like this, with you, the man who destroyed everything." Moments later, the sound of the car door opening and closing was followed by the faint hum of the engine. I turned off the feed, anger and bitterness boiling within me. Despite everything, I couldn't take satisfaction in Mary's suffering. While rummaging in the garage, I found an old set of locks I had purchased years ago but never installed. It felt like the right time. By the time I finished replacing the locks, Mary's keys no longer fit my home. I called Helen. "How are you holding up?" I asked. She sounded weary but managed a response. "I'm okay. I'll be back soon." Alex showed up here, demanding to talk to me. He wanted me to let him in. My anger flared. "Stay inside and call me if he comes back. I'll be there in 10 minutes. As I drove to Helen's house, my thoughts swirled. Alex had not only betrayed me, but had discarded Mary as soon as it suited him. His selfishness was revolting. When I arrived, Alex's car was parked at the curb. He stood on the porch, deep in conversation with Helen. As I stepped out of my car, he turned to face me. "Let me talk to Helen," he demanded. "No, she was your wife, but you threw that away," I replied firmly. "I warned you not to come back. Remember what I promised? Don't make me follow through." "I just want to talk to her," he insisted. "It's too late," I said coldly. "The photos? I've sent them to everyone. To your children, your friends, even the newspaper. Talking to Helen won't save your marriage. Expect the divorce papers on Monday. Congratulations, you wanted fun, and you got more than you bargained for. Ignoring a police car parked nearby, Alex stormed toward me. His fist landed on my chest, knocking me to the ground. Before he could strike again, 2 officers intervened, pulling him away and cuffing him. "I'll find you," Alex shouted as he was escorted to the police car. Helen joined me, and we explained the situation to the officers. Alex continued shouting threats from the back seat as they drove off. Inside, Helen looked at me cautiously. "Did you really send those photos?" "No," I admitted. "It would only hurt him and, worse, hurt the kids. They're supposed to come next weekend for their mother's birthday. I wouldn't dare ruin that." Her expression softened as she nodded. "This whole ordeal has been unbearable," she said quietly. "Watching Alex's betrayal was hard enough. But I don't want my kids to know about this side of him or of me. Part of me still hoped we could fix things. But I realized something." She paused, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't need him to feel complete anymore. These past few days, I've seen the truth. I'm not alone. I never was. There's someone who has always been there, taking care of my kids, supporting me. Someone who loves me." I reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. "You were always there for us. Our football coach. The one who went camping with us. The one who fixed the leaky water heater. You stood in the doorway, your face marked by concern." I could see that Alex was upset, so I decided to contact the police. I described the situation in detail, expressing my fears about his violent tendencies. As I watched, I saw the officers drive up. "I feared he would hurt you again, and his blow to your chest had caused you immense pain. I thought perhaps a kiss might ease the hurt, something to comfort you. It seemed like a good plan. Maybe we should retreat to the bedroom to calm down a bit." I hugged you, and you hugged me back. We walked to the bedroom together, but to my surprise, the room was empty. The bed was unmade, and the floor was bare, no carpet, no decoration. Despite the emptiness, we spent the evening together. We hugged, kissed, and found solace in each other's presence until the sun began to rise. As the first rays of light began to fill the room, both our phones rang. Helen answered hers without getting out of bed. I hurried into the hallway to answer mine. It was Todd, my eldest son. "Dad, what's going on?" he asked, confusion in his voice. "What do you mean?" I replied, trying to make sense of his words. He explained that he had called his mother this morning to discuss the upcoming week and their visit, but she had burst into tears and told him to call me. She had refused to speak further. "When will the 3 of you be home?" "If you need us, we can come tonight," Todd offered, his concern growing. "What's going on?" he asked again. "I can't talk about it over the phone," I said, my voice tight. "Call me back later, and I'll tell you what's happening. If you're flying, I'll meet you at the airport. If you're driving, let me know when you're near. You don't want to tell me about it now." Todd pressed. "No," I answered, feeling the weight of it all. "It's better this way." I ended the call and turned back toward the bedroom. Helen, still on the phone, looked pale, frozen in place. She motioned for me to come over, and as soon as I reached her, she broke the conversation. "This is Carol," she whispered. "Her father called from prison last night, asking for help with bail." Carol had asked what had happened, and Helen told her that we needed a family meeting urgently. "My kids are coming back tonight. Let's meet at my house and share everything together," Helen suggested. Alex was still in custody, and Mary's whereabouts were unknown. Helen told her daughter to go home and bring her brother, so they could all meet at my place. Carol asked many questions, but Helen only promised to provide answers when we were all together. I contacted our lawyer, Henry, to arrange for the delivery of the photos and discuss our future plans. He approved our strategy and promised to personally deliver the photos. As preparations began, I packed Alex's things into boxes and placed them in the garage. Helen found a spare key to his car, and we stashed that in the garage 2. Helen's phone calls were now forwarded to mine. Once we got to my house, I started gathering my belongings. Helen, occasionally asking for advice, seemed lost in thought. The phone rang. It was Carol, saying she'd be there in an hour. Helen thanked her and ended the call. Moments later, my children called to say they would arrive around the same time. Helen suggested ordering pizza and salad, so she quickly placed the order. As she gathered clothes and items, I felt the need to occupy myself. When I came out of the bedroom, I found Helen standing by the window. I walked over and hugged her, knowing emotions would run high. Any anger or tears would be directed at the betrayal, not at us. I know we haven't done anything wrong. I reassured myself, and we have each other. I hope my presence here will make things a little easier for you, she said, looking up at me, her eyes soft. She leaned down to kiss me. At that moment, my son Todd's car pulled up and the pizza delivery arrived. I'm going to set the table, Helen said, and hurried to the kitchen. I opened the door to find Todd helping Helen bring in the food. He quickly paid the delivery guy, but then he noticed the tension in the air. "Where's Mom?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied, trying to stay calm. Helen's children soon arrived, and I greeted them warmly. But when they started asking questions, I raised my hand to silence them. "Food can wait," I said. "Let's all gather in the living room, and I'll explain everything." Helen's children sat on one sofa and mine on the other. I invited Helen to sit in a large armchair while I grabbed a chair from the kitchen. Just as I was about to sit down, there was a knock at the door. Henry, our lawyer, handed me a large envelope. "Good luck," he said quietly, noticing the children in the room. He asked if I needed him to stay, but I declined, thanking him as I closed the door behind him. I sat down and decided to begin. About a week ago, I was out fishing with friends. One of them mentioned seeing Mary at the Marriott Hotel. Intrigued, I decided to follow her, using a GPS tracker on her car. A few days later, Mary returned to the hotel, but this time, Alex was there too. I paused to gauge everyone's reaction. The children exchanged glances. Just because they were at the same hotel doesn't mean they were having an affair. Alex's son spoke up, trying to defend the situation. "True," I acknowledged, but after investigating, I found that Alex had rented the same room at the hotel several times since January. I had to know more. The tension in the room grew thick. I hired someone to check it out, hoping there was no affair. I also asked Helen if she knew why Alex was staying there. Our lawyer advised us to leave the city for a few days to figure out what was really going on. Helen had gone to Mirage in Las Vegas, while I stayed at Treasure Island. The next day, our lawyer called with the worst news. He had photos of Alex and Mary. I looked at the envelope on the floor. "Yes," I confirmed, "Helen and I have decided to stay a little longer. This situation is truly disgusting." When we returned, they were at Helen's house. We caught them red-handed. Confronting them, we suggested they divorce if they wanted to be together. Mary agreed without hesitation, but Alex refused. After allowing them to gather their personal belongings, we escorted them out of the house. Since that day, I have had no contact with Mary. Helen later informed me that Alex returned to her porch, threatening her. She contacted the authorities, and when Alex escalated and attacked me as well, he was arrested. As far as I know, Alex remains in custody. During the interrogation, the officer asked us directly, "Do you both want a divorce?" We confirmed. "Have you looked at the photos?" they asked. "Yes," I admitted. "We saw them cheating in my mother's living room." The officer cautioned us. "You shouldn't look at those photos again. They're needed for legal purposes." Helen's children were processing the situation. "Dad's going to jail?" one of them asked. "Yes," Helen confirmed. "He attacked Nick and threatened me in front of 2 officers. I think he'll serve his time for this." "How long ago did you find out Father was unfaithful?" Carol asked her mother. Helen hesitated before answering. "Nick showed me the hotel records. Alex used our retirement savings to book rooms at the Marriott Hotel. Wow, Carol whispered, the betrayal sinking in. The others nodded in agreement. What happens next? One of the children asked. Helen took a deep breath. There will be changes. I've decided to sell the house. It's too big for me now. Mom, I don't want to move, her daughter protested. I've been thinking about getting a roommate, Helen offered gently, trying to reassure her. The conversation shifted when Carol suddenly asked, Mom, are you and Nick together? Helen smiled softly. Yes. We spent a lot of time in Las Vegas, and when we returned home, we decided to continue our relationship. Before learning of our spouse's infidelity, Nick and I had never kissed. But now, I have the honor of calling him my lover and future husband. We hope you can accept this new reality, one shaped by love and resilience. We both love each of you deeply. There was a heavy silence in the room. Then Carol rose from her seat and came to me. Kneeling down, she hesitated before taking the envelope. I don't want to see these photos, she whispered, but I feel like I have to. I can't believe this story, but if the photos confirm it, I'll have no choice. With trembling hands, she carefully opened the envelope. She looked at only one photo before closing it quickly. What a scoundrel, she exclaimed, handing the envelope back to me. You have to let him know what you think of him. I was tempted to do so, but before I could act, Helen's son came over. Taking the envelope, he calmly looked through about 10 photos, one by one, before returning them to their place. The moment passed, and we decided to finish the leftover pizza and salad. That evening, we all went out to a Chinese restaurant for dinner. Despite the emotional turmoil, we began to bond as a mixed family. While waiting for fortune cookies, my son Matt asked, maybe we'll plan a hike this summer? Helen smiled warmly. Some of my happiest memories from when you were little were our hikes together. I remained quiet, reflecting on the moment when Helen's daughter Carol looked at me and asked, May I call you Dad? Tears welled up in my eyes. How could she have grown to care for me so quickly? And how could I refuse? Of course, I said, my voice trembling. It would mean the world to me. The rest of the family echoed their support. We coordinated our schedules, choosing a date for our first family camping trip. Though traces of resentment and disappointment lingered, we looked ahead with hope. Years have passed. Mary disappeared shortly after everything unfolded. The day after she last spoke to our children, she withdrew money from her credit card and vanished. She never appeared in court, and her whereabouts remain unknown. Alex is currently serving a prison sentence of 2.5 to 5 years. None of the children have visited him. The envelope with the photos remains in our home safe, a reminder of the past. But every year, our family continues the tradition of hiking together. Alex had the chance to keep his home, his job, and Helen. I often wonder if he ever thinks about all that he threw away.